Welcome to all of you on this webinar on biomaterial strategies for drug delivery. I look forward to a fruitful interaction. I'll switch off my video and start off with my talk. So just to outline the concepts that we are going to cover today, I'll briefly try to let you know, first of all, of course, the basic concept of a biomaterial and what are the various ways in which we can modulate these biomaterials for different applications. And then we will focus on drug delivery systems. So what we will look at for drug delivery systems is why at all we need them and what are the various advances from the materials point of view that can be exploited to give us additional features in these systems. So broadly, I will cover the concept of what is called as trigger responsive nanoparticles and external internal triggers as well as their combinations. The concept of theranostics will also be covered in this angle. And then I'll also talk to you about addressing different kinds of challenges depending on the route of administration. So the path that a drug delivery carrier actually faces varies depending on where you're administering the drug and how you're administering it. So we'll talk a little bit about respiratory drug delivery and the concept of respirable aerosols. And then what if you want to deliver more than one drug with the same carrier system? How do you modulate your biomaterials for this? In this concept, we want to look at what your end use is. Do you want both the drugs to be delivered simultaneously or sequentially? And then we look at overcoming various barriers, be they at the blood-brain barrier to reach drugs to the brain, or go through skin, which we call as transdermal drug delivery, ocular, from the front of the eye to the back of the eye. So the concept of fluidizing or permeation enhancing biomaterials, which will go through these anatomical barriers for delivery. And then the last platform I will be touching upon is that of an in situ gel. Now, this is a concept where you can cause a depot formulation, and this is particularly suitable for applications where you want a regional focus in the drug delivery. And then we'll discuss a bit about the potential as well as the challenges of some of these technologies. Okay, so as most of you will be familiar, what we mean by biomaterials is essentially materials which are used in a biological context. Traditionally, these biomaterials were used as replacements for body parts, either structural or functional. And so they were predominantly as implants. Now, as time went on, this role of the biomaterial has moved from what used to be just a passive role to a much more active role. And if you see on the right side, you see multiple applications of biomaterials, ranging from drug delivery to tissue engineering, where you help in the regeneration of certain tissues, medical devices, point of care diagnostics, as well as preventive strategies in the form of vaccines. And there are a lot of overlaps between these areas. So for example, you have things which are, models of organ on a chip, which act for drug screening as well as act as devices. Similarly, you have delivery of agents across drug delivery to tissue engineering when you're looking at growth promoting agents. And theranostics, which is the implication of drug delivery along with diagnostics. So today, mainly we will focus on drug delivery, but I'll briefly touch upon tissue engineering, theranostics, and vaccines also. So what do we mean by drug delivery? Why do we need biomaterials and carriers for drug delivery? So the analogy that I like to give in this context is that of postal delivery. So we know that the idea of a postal delivery is that the mail is actually your content, and this is usually within an envelope. Now the envelope is what covers the letter, and the envelope has its own features. It's going to have an address, and it has this stamp of approval through the postal system. Now, once these things are done, what happens is that the letter reaches the correct recipient. It does not go to other people. And before it reaches the recipient, even while it is being handled in the postal system, it is protected by the envelope from leaking out or coming out and exposing the contents. So the analogy of drug delivery is very similar. Your letter is your drug. So the active needs to reach a particular site. Which site is this? That is the site of action. Now, while it reaches the site of action, you want to assist this process. How do you assist this process? By designing this envelope. And this envelope is your drug delivery carrier or your biomaterial. Now, the role of this carrier is finished once the letter needs to be read, which means that at the site of action of the drug has to come out and the rest of the biomaterial has done its role. And so that's the concept of a biodegradable material. You put it in, but essentially towards the end, you need to be able to break it down and the body should be able to get rid of that biomaterial. Now, in terms of the functionality of protection, till it reaches the target site, the drug must be covered by this biomaterial. And that's what we are calling as encapsulation. And hence, any cells along the way till you reach the target site actually do not see your drug, free drug, but it interacts with your envelope or the biomaterial. And hence, you can protect labile drugs from degradation before reaching the site of action. Then the other point is what I mentioned about this stamp of approval. So when we talk about drug delivery, if you give any drug intravenously, what happens is that the reticuloendothelial system is actually the first line of defense, which is going to look at your drug as a foreign substance. And it is important that the residence time in the circulation is increased by escaping an immediate degradation by the reticuloendothelial system. So basically, the stamp of approval as far as drug delivery systems is concerned is that it must escape phagocytosis by macrophages prior to reaching the target site. And this is what we refer to as long circulating carriers. Now, the last part that we mention here is what we call as opposing criteria. Now, here I'd like to highlight that on the one hand, for drug delivery and for your postal delivery, we need a feature of extreme rigidity of the envelope so that it does not wear and tear while it is being transported. At the same time, when the recipient actually wants to take the letter out, there must be ways of opening up the envelope. And hence, you have two differing criteria. One of a rigid envelope or biomaterial that is going to prevent any leakage of the bioactive till the site of action. And at the same time, at the site of action, this material should either break down or be leaky so that the active is actually released so that you get its effects. And hence, we have two sets of criteria to fulfill. One in circulation prior to reaching the target site, and a completely different one on reaching the target site. And one has to design one's biomaterial strategies so that both of these are fulfilled. Okay, so now what are these biomaterials? We can have various kinds of carriers. Broadly, they can be particulate or they can be gel-based systems and combinations. So self-assembled particles, basically be they lipid, polymeric, biopolymeric, they are driven by the concept of amphiphilic molecules. When you have an amphiphilic molecule of both a hydrophilic and a hydrophobic end, a simple one shown here is a phospholipid, these can then self-assemble depending on the surrounding environment so that the water-loving components are more towards the aqueous environment and the hydrophobic ends are protected from aqueous environments. Using these principles, you can cause various forms of self-assembled structures. In this slide, you see an example where this is a bilayer structure, again amphiphilic. This is the hydrophilic, this is the hydrophobic components. Now, depending on the phase transition of the layers, the packing, that is the lateral distance between these various molecules, can be modulated. And depending on various other moieties and environmental structures, these can be made to self-assemble to different kinds of structures, which can also convert from one to another. And just some examples, this is not a comprehensive list, is shown here. The common one is something that you would have all heard of, is the bilayer structure of the liposome, where you have the liposome forming concentric layers of these bilayers with an aqueous core in the center. Cochleates are when these are spiral shaped structures. Tubular is when there's a hollow tubular assembly. Hexagonal structures give you hexosomes, and cubical phase gives you the cubosomes. Now, when we are designing these biomaterials, one of the advantages we want to get for drug delivery is a certain amount of specificity. Can we control where the biomaterial and the drug delivery is going to reach and where it is going to release? In this context, we often also look at another parameter, which is size, and hence nanoparticles are often designed. Now, strictly, nanoparticles are in the size range of 0 to 100 nanometers, but in the nanomedicine domain, even submicron particles are often referred to as nanoparticles, provided they cause a switch in properties in terms of the response of cells to the internalization or uptake of these particles. So just one example is shown here, which is something which most of you would have heard of, which is known as the enhanced permeation and retention effect. This is used extensively for cancers, and what this does essentially is to utilize the size of the particles and the anatomical considerations of the disease site. So the capillaries, the normal capillaries have very closely packed endothelial cells, whereas the capillaries associated with tumors are poorly formed and they have gaps between the endothelial cells. So the concept here is to passively cause a movement of these particles through the gaps of the endothelial cells to cause a preferential accumulation at the tumor site. Now, the other thing that's shown here is that after reaching the vicinity of the tumor, various strategies which are known as triggers can be utilized to actually change the phase or degrade the carriers for drug release. We'll look at that a little bit more. So as I was mentioning, so there's combinations of both targeting and triggering strategies. What is the difference between these two? Targeting means that you are utilizing certain properties to get a preferential localization to the disease site. If it is by physicochemical properties, it is referred to as passive targeting. If it is with the help of biological moieties, then it is referred to as active targeting. So when you use an active targeting moiety, you want to exploit certain receptors which are overexpressed in the disease site. Now, because these would be overexpressed at the disease site, you will have the decoration of the corresponding ligand on your material. And the interaction between the ligand and this receptor is going to give you enhanced receptor-mediated endocytosis, which means that basically the cell is going to assist you in the internalization of the drug at the target site. And then there are also additional challenges, particularly in the form of resistance. Now, multi-drug resistance actually is seen in multiple diseases. We are familiar with this concept with bacterial infections, we have multi-drug resistant bacteria. And similarly, in cancers also, there's a concept of multi-drug resistance. What this means is the drug, it ceases to have the effectiveness on certain disease states. And there are multiple mechanisms for this, but the concept is that if you have to address this, you have to target one of the multiple mechanisms responsible for resistance and try to either bypass or limit the effect of that resistance. So some of these are mentioned here, like pH modulation, drug, efflux. So I'll talk a little bit about this bypassing the pump and drug efflux. So what happens in tumors as well as in certain types of bacteria is that they will overexpress certain efflux pumps. And if this efflux pump is overexpressed on the surface of the cell, then even if the free drug is in the vicinity of the cell, the pump will actually throw out the drug. And hence you get lower effectiveness of that drug. Now, only increasing doses is an inefficient way to deal with this because you get an increase in the off-target toxicity, whereas the efficacy still remains limited. So you must design strategies to address this pump. And one of the strategies is what is referred to as a Trojan horse concept. So as you would have heard of the story of Troy, right? So this is the concept of where there was this large horse, which was seemingly innocuous and, sort of beautiful looking and was taken inside, whereas the enemy soldiers were actually hiding within the horse. Once the horse got entry, then at night time, the soldiers come out and actually destroy the uh, kingdom and win the war. So what is the concept here? The concept is that the agent which is responsible for the aggression or the effect in our case is by itself not welcome. However, if we can hide within another structure which is considered favorable, then you piggy bank on the modes of entry of that favorable structure to gain access and then release your aggressive elements. For the drug delivery concept and for bypassing efflux pumps, this becomes very useful. The biomaterial is like this horse, and your drug is entrapped within this carrier. It has to go inside the cell, bypassing the pump by getting recognized for one of the pathways of endocytosis. And internally, then the particle opens up to release the drug intracellularly. And there are various pathways for endocytosis, and we can modulate the biomaterial to exploit one or other pathway. So just to show you, these are the cancer cells, and essentially when you have the particles going in, you will see the fluorescence. And depending on these various inhibitors that are used, different sub-pathways of endocytosis are blocked. And you can then modulate and know through which pathway your carrier is going in. So for example, if you have a caveolé mediated pathway or a clathrin mediated pathway, this can be controlled by the composition of your carrier material, irrespective of the drug. And then the concept, as I mentioned, of trigger responsive carriers, nanoparticles as well as biomaterials. Now here, what we're saying is, can we have two different behaviors of the same biomaterial depending on the immediate stimuli that it is subjected to? And some of these triggers or stimuli that can be used for drug delivery are shown in this picture. And you see here pH, temperature, redox state, enzyme levels, light, magnetic field, ultrasound. These have been put with this bold because these are what we refer to as external triggers, whereas the ones on the right are your internal triggers. What internal trigger means is that the change in this stimulus between either a site and the targeted site, or between normal and diseased, is already present in the body. And our task as drug delivery designers is to modulate the biomaterial carrier so that it responds to these changes. So can your biomaterial either break down or have a phase transition in the presence of the changes in these parameters associated with your target site? And external trigger indicates that this trigger or stimulus is not already present in the body at different positions, but you are focusing this from outside to cause this to have an effect on certain localized areas, and hence have their benefits in terms of changing phases of your biomaterials. Now, just to give you an analogy of this concept, then internal stimulus is like designing a solar panel, right? So when you're designing a solar panel, you are taking advantage of the solar energy, but you do not have any control on the amount of sunlight that a particular location is going to receive, or its variation different during different times. What you will know is the information about these, and you will hence optimize the localization of your solar panels. So the internal stimulus is already present, let's say a lower pH associated with a certain disease state, and you cannot modulate that change, but you can know where to expect a certain change and design your carrier and biomaterial so that it responds to that particular change. So there are multiple ways in which you can design pH responsive biomaterials. They can directly break down bonds within your polymeric system. They can cleave off, linkages, which then release certain actives. They can also cause changes in phase. And this is one example where essentially, if you have different kinds of materials, they can be made to coexist in the form of a lamellar phase. But when there's a pH change, because of the change in balance between the size of head group and the chains, you get an inverted hexagonal phase. And this then gives you an inside out configuration leading to release of the drug. The other very important thing to keep in mind, and something that is sometimes overlooked, is that what your barriers are and what your triggers are will depend also on the route of administration. So a carrier which is going through an intravenous route faces a different set of challenges as one which is being given orally, or one which is being given as an aerosol directly into the respiratory system. So depending on your route of administration, you have to modulate your biomaterial strategy to overcome the barriers expected to be faced during that particular route of administration. So first example is that of the respiratory system and looking at aerosols. Now, regardless of what the composition of the biomaterial is for a respiratory aerosol, there are a couple of things that one has to keep in mind. And the first and foremost is where in the respiratory system you want the drug to act. So depending on whether it is meant to work in the upper airways, lower airways, or deep down in the alveoli, your strategy has to be different in order to allow the maximum deposition at the site of action. And this is determined by something which is called as the mass median aerodynamic diameter, which essentially determines the flow and deposition of your particles when inhaled. And the other point to keep in mind for particles going to the respiratory system, particularly if they are going deep into the lungs, is its interaction with something known as an alveolar surfactant. Now, alveolar surfactant is this unique mix of phospholipids, proteins, and other lipids, which forms a layer in the alveolar interface. Now, this is responsible for reduction in surface tension of the alveoli. Why it is important for drug delivery carriers for the respiratory system is that this is actually the first structure that the particles face and interact with when designed for lower alveolar deposition. So the interactions between these two have to be very carefully studied and modulated. Again, if you're going to have pH responsive platforms in aerosols, you can do this to look at pulmonary metastasis. Now, the advantage that you get here is that the first occasion of a change in pH is that associated with your disease site because it is being given as an aerosol, and once it reaches the pulmonary metastasis, you can design your carrier to destabilize in the lower pH. Now, just to give you the contrast, if you were to design this for an oral delivery, the same strategy would not work. You would have to work through first the travel of your biomaterial through the stomach into the intestine, absorption, and then your trigger at your target site. Okay. Then to go to the concept briefly of dual drug delivery, many diseases are actually requiring more than one drug to treat. And sometimes there are advantages of having the same biomaterial being able to deliver more than one drug. So when we're looking at dual drug delivery, the design of your biomaterial is basically determined by one, what is your drug? Is it hydrophobic, hydrophilic? What are their interactions? And also, what is the desired kinetics for those drugs? So just to give you a simple example, on the left, I won't get into the details, but on the left is something which is a core shell carrier, whereas on the right, it's this conjoint two compartment carrier. So in the one case, you can do a sequential delivery, and in one case, you can have a simultaneous delivery depending on what is required. So if you require sequential delivery, you usually prefer layered or core shell based structures or multiple materials which will then respond to different stimuli so that one part of your carrier gets destabilized earlier than the other, leaving the other intact. And hence you can control the release of two different types of drugs. And once again, route can be still developed by you, whether it's through aerosol or through oral or intravenous. But based on your route, you will also have to keep in mind what are the barriers that it needs to overcome. A little bit about externally triggered nanoparticles and biomaterials, as well as the concept of theranostics. As I mentioned in the previous figure, there was actually the concept of using light, temperature, magnetic fields, as well as ultrasound as external triggers. Whereas the internal trigger analogy was that of the solar panel, the external trigger analogy is more like a remote control. So the control is in your hand. So you have the ability to control how much, where to focus, and those are advantages of the external trigger. However, the fact that it needs to be applied externally means that there are some additional implications in terms of costs and infrastructure associated with these technologies. So as I mentioned, these could be magnetic, could be near infrared responsive in the case of gold particles, and could also be ultrasound responsive in the case of what is known as bubble-based strategies. So what is this bubble concept? Now here what it means is that there is a shell which then encapsulates the core, which has a gas. And because of this, when an ultrasound is applied to these ultrasound contrast agents, typically microbubbles and now also nanobubble structures, bubbles will then oscillate. And based on their oscillation, on the one hand, you get the imaging of ultrasound contrast, but as you change the intensity of the ultrasound, you can also get very forceful bursting of these bubbles, things that are referred to as cavitation. And because of this, what happens is that there are multiple local effects. Common amongst them are what is known as sonoporation, which means by this ultrasound burst, you create tiny transient pores in the cell membranes of the surrounding cells. Now, that's a very interesting concept for therapeutics because it means that you can enhance drug permeability by controlling this ultrasound responsive carriers. Yeah, and further, the ultrasound by itself is also used in terms of local heating, mechanical effects, and causing direct effects of cytotoxicity. So the advantage that we get here is two things. One is that these are now trackable. So this is where you get the concept of theranostics. It means that we want to do therapy, but we also want to progress on the imaging aspect, and hence we can track as well as cause release of drugs as required, right? And so, so just to show you that you are able to, sort of, if you look at these images, you're able to have modulation of localization based on ultrasound. And because it is also an imaging modality, you get the advance of tracking the carrier and focusing it at need. And this can give you this kind of an on-demand release concept. This kind of strategy is applicable for ultrasound, it's applicable for light, as well as for magnetic fields. So this is the concept of both external trigger and theranostics. Moving on quickly to concepts of enhanced penetration through multiple barriers. So one really difficult barrier is that of the skin. As patients, I think we would all agree that, if drugs could just be put on the skin and you would get effects, we would hesitate to go in for intravenous injections, right? But yet, what is the barrier then to do this? And that is the low permeability of the outermost layer of the skin, which is known as the stratum corneum. Now, this is actually protective in function, but when it comes to drug delivery, then this becomes a barrier. So what one has to do is smartly design the biomaterial carrier to cause various types of interactions with this stratum corneum, so which is known as fluidization. It essentially means that the packing of this layer is transiently altered to allow the penetration of the drug carrier. The other routes by which you can actually exploit drug delivery across the skin is also to grow through appendages, one of which is the follicles. Now, the hair follicles are there. If you can design your biomaterial in such a way that it is going to go along your hair shaft and get absorbed through the dermis, that gives you a very interesting alternative route. Another big challenge is that of ocular delivery. Now, we would all know that, any substance, even a small eyelash coming on the surface of the eye, causes intense irritation and watering. So this lacrimation or tear fluid causes washout of any drug that is put on the surface of the eye. So the challenge for ocular delivery is to design your biomaterial so that it sticks on to the surface of the eye and does not get washed out. And this is what we call as mucoadhesive. It adheres to the mucus of the ocular surface. And then after that, you again ask the question, where in the eye do you want the drug to go? All conventional drug delivery systems for the eye have limited reach beyond the anterior segment. So the back of the eye diseases have a huge challenge in terms of drug delivery because you want to reach all the way to the retina by a drug which is being applied on the surface. So if you design your biomaterials, you can then have penetration through these barriers to cause a more acceptable patient compliant form with a larger residence time. The other major barrier which we would all know of is what is referred to as the blood brain barrier. Now the blood brain barrier has a unique system where the capillaries are very closely packed and the end plates are such that you form a specific barrier which prevents substances from going across to the brain. Now, for designing carriers for delivery to the brain, you have to have strategies to be able to pass through this blood-brain barrier. One concept is that of nose to brain delivery, which exploits the anatomical features of the uppermost part of the nose where the olfactory nerves are located. So the same way that you smell various substances, can you exploit that pathway by designing the biomaterials to go through the upper part of the nose into the brain? The reason being that at that location, the blood-brain barrier is actually not present. Okay. Briefly, the concept of an in situ gel. Now, what we mean by an in situ gel is that the gel forms a meshwork and hence is going to give you a depot or residence time. But if you have a preformed gel, then administering it would usually require you to implant this gel, which becomes invasive. So can you design an in situ gel, which is a smart biomaterial? It's going to be liquid on installation. And after you have instilled, it is going to actually form a gel at the site. So various applications exist. And for each of them, the strategy of your in situ gelation and the trigger has to be optimized for that specific need. So one example I'm showing you here is what is called as intravesical drug delivery. Now, this is actually the urinary bladder. Now, if you give a drug systemically, very little reaches the urinary bladder. If I give the drug directly in through the urethra, as you can imagine, its residence time is going to be only dependent on the first urination. So the challenge here is, can we design strategies by which your biomaterial is actually going to coat the urothelial surface and be stable and form a gel so that it forms a depot inside the bladder? Okay. Similar concept is that of post-surgical implants. So for example, in brain tumors, after the tumor is debrided, can you have strategies by which you have at the same surgery a depot of the drug in a gel-based or wafer-based format so that slowly it degrades and causes release of drug over long periods of time, once again, completely tunable in terms of the degradation profile. And it's not just restricted to drugs. This in situ gel concept can well be used for growth factors and cells. So that's where you can use this for tissue regeneration purposes. In this case, what you're trying to do is mimic the extracellular matrix of a particular tissue, whereas you are also providing the growth promoting agents, release of bioactives, and cells. Common places where these have been applied a lot are in the joints. Can we look at the extracellular matrix of cartilage? Can we look at depots for arthritis so that you get enhanced action in the joints but minimal effects elsewhere systemically? One more platform I would briefly touch upon is something known as a microneedle array. Now, we all know that injections can be given to overcome some of the barriers that we are talking about, and particularly if we want to give something through skin. Now, the pain and other associated problems with injections can be minimized by what we call as microneedles. Now, microneedles, as the name suggests, are very tiny needles which are extremely thin. Now, these needle patches can be self-applied, and they can be of various forms: hollow, where the drug is directly placed through them; solid, where they are required just to create the penetration through the skin; or completely dissolvable, where you can apply the patch and hence cause it to dissolve and create a depot. The last point that I'll mention is that apart from drugs, there is now a lot of interest also to utilize the adjuvant properties of many of these biomaterials, and these can then be used for vaccine delivery. Now, the properties here are essentially: one, stabilizing the vaccine candidate, and two, having a target specificity to certain types of cells like the antigen presenting cells, and also enhancing the immunogenicity by acting as adjuvants. So various opportunities exist. A few words about the challenges. The challenges arise in terms of when you're dealing with internal triggers. The success of your strategy is directly going to depend on how clean your internal trigger is, which means how much of a difference is there between your non-target and target site. And as you recall, that's not in your control. So that variability one has to keep in mind. In terms of external triggers, one has to keep in mind the depth of focus that is required. And then the fate of the particle or material completely needs to be worked out. It needs to be biodegradable. And finally, as biomaterial scientists, we have the opportunity to create many kinds of materials, but we have to keep in mind safety, cost, and complexity. So material should be as complex as is needed, but not more. So the complexity should not be only because we can do it, but because it is needed. If we keep these in mind, there's a lot of potential. We can exploit specificity, both site specific as well as disease specific, can cause reductions in toxicity, doses, and explore alternate routes of delivery and concepts of on-demand release. Thank you.